okay? And it's simply about doing things right. What we do in Nigeria that we will get away with, we may not be able to get away with it in the UK. Issues may be raised in the UK or other jurisdictions. And I've had some people who have even said that, look, the problem in the UK for the Ekweremados was avoidable. But, you know, as family, as human beings, when we find ourselves in certain situations, we're bound to respond as human beings. So I think that the two issues should be separated. But it's not for me to sit in judgment over that. I'm sure if the matter is before the court, the learned jurist in charge of it will be able to make that proper separation.
Okay, so because of time, I think I'll just take one. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. And good job, EFCC. But it is sad that President Muhammadu Buhari's administration that says he's coming to fight corruption has become the grand palace of corruption. How come an accountant general that is supposed to take stock of our money is now accounting the money in his own pocket on behalf of Nigerians? Dear EFCC, how much did this man steal? This 30 billion is not good enough. For a man to be able to return 30 billion, that means there's way more there. So like they say in local parlance, can't we press further and ensure that the rest money is released onto Nigerians? It is alleged that over 109 billion, at some point he was looking for a plea bargain. Was this 30 billion after a plea bargain? And how much? Nigerians must be able to know. And in entirety, all the monies stolen and the properties must be recovered and be used for the Nigerian people. It is sad that in a country we complain that there is no money to do a lot of things. One man, the Accountant General, could go away with this humongous amount of money. But I'm not only going to link it to this administration. Even the administration before this one, over 8 years ago, that was the same way the Accountant General had corruption issues, and he stole money. So why is it that our governmental systems have been so porous that it is easy for Accountant Generals to be able to steal? That's the question we should ask ourselves. Question is, and like I always say, culture will eat strategy for breakfast. It is because we have built a culture that is so easy to steal money in government, and there's no public accountability in government, and that's why our accountant generals can steal. How ironic. Accountant generals are the ones frittering away our money and stealing our money. So it's a moment of introspection. And dear EFCC, please, other people you see to them that have stolen our commonwealth, it is time we press their neck to bring the money out. Because for every time they steal, they deny Nigerians access to the basic commodities of life and the basic utilities of life. Probably those monies will have been plowed into projects, buy drugs in hospitals that will help the lot of Nigerians. But no, it's in personal pockets. Good job, EFCC. We need to see more. That's all on News Headlines. Take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Michael Worcester, Road Studio, to give us updates on global and African business activities. Stay with us.
I've been running my business on my own, trying my best to get it to the next level, but I really need some help to get ahead. I know just what to do, I'll vote it for my loans, overdraft, step by step to my dream business we vote. Salary earners, entrepreneurs, get your loans with no collateral. Quick sign up, 0 tomorrow paper work. Vault. Step by step to your dream business with Vault. By Polaris Bank.
Vault is available to individuals, SMEs, and corporate customers. Download Vault by Polaris Bank from the Google Play Store or Apple App Store to get started today.
Vault is the answer.
Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Amazing. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas. I wanna wish you a Merry Christmas.
Glow wishes you a Merry Christmas.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from Cape Town, South Africa. Good morning, Michael.
Morning. A bit of a slowdown really yesterday. Asia trading slightly lower this morning. Worries about the hawkishness of the United States, the hawkishness of what the Fed was saying. Also, retail sales disappointing in the United States as well. The Hang Seng up very, very marginally, but the Shanghai Composite down similarly very, very marginally. So basically fairly flat. It's the second day of China's annual economic work conference, which apparently is taking place behind closed doors. We'll get some idea of what they plan for their growth forecasts when they actually emerge from those closed doors. China's chip makers, secondly, are suffering US restrictions, even more on the so-called US entity list, which they're being excluded from for national security worries. This is basically in the areas of semiconductors, and we're talking about the Chinese military, we're talking about technologies, we're talking about AA, and we're talking about advanced computing. So in all those kind of areas, if anything is being seen by or being thought by the US authorities to help the China military, then it's being stopped from exporting. And China itself experiencing a slight sort of reopening. They're very, very worried about that, though. A lot of people are thinking there's going to be new challenges, and infections are in fact soaring as a result of this opening. So the COVID not over in China yet. Let's turn our attention to the United States, and stock futures fairly flat, really. Wednesday's sell-off continued in normal trading. The Dow shed 764 points. I've talked already about those disappointing retail sales. And the Fed lifting interest rates to the highest level in 15 years. It's still relatively hawkish in its outlook. We're going to hear from various Fed speakers again today, and we may get some idea of what they think about the economy as far as the United States is concerned. The EU, very aggressive again. The European Central Bank raising interest rates by 0.5% from 1.5% to 2%. The ECB and Ursula von der Leyen saying we want to reduce the balance sheet by $15 billion a month. We are not pivoting, she says. We have longer to go. And she doesn't expect inflation, or at least the ECB doesn't expect inflation to fall below 2.3% by 2025. Remember, the ECB's target is 2%, so it's still a long way off. As far as the Bank of England is concerned, raising rates the highest in 14 years yesterday, up as expected, another 0.5%. Further tightening likely. A lot of people thought this was very dovish. I didn't think it was dovish at all. I think that two people on the Monetary Policy Committee did not agree with what was being said. said. But I think if you add wary consumers to that and so on, then again, not a great deal of future out of the recession for the UK economy. And there's some bright news from the city. Intercontinental exchange called ICE could be moving from Amsterdam to London after the gas price cap. They're the biggest gas traders in the world. As far as oil's concerned, general worries about recession pulling crude prices slightly lower. Stronger the dollar, the weaker the oil price, basically, and global recession risks still hanging over the oil market. That's the global view this morning.
All right, real quickly, Michael. I still keep looking at the oil market. Amidst global recession fears, what should we be, really afraid of at this point in time? Global recession fears, should we be afraid that there's going to be slowdown in the uptake of oil? And how would that impact economies like us?
Well, I mean, the crude price is falling. You've seen it. I mean, I've talked about it earlier this week as being in this range between $70 and $80 a barrel. It looks as though it could drop below that. And it's all basically about the worries about global recession. And it could be that because oil, after all, is just a commodity, and if people don't want to use it, then they don't buy it. And if there's a global recession, people will use less. We still don't really know China is. We don't know the effect of what's happening with the Ukraine war. We don't have to Russian oil exports and so on. There's a whole load of uncertainties. But from volatility, I think we've moved into an area of pessimism. And I suspect that will probably last until we get some further indications, particularly from OPEC Plus, for example, which is apparently telling us something that you and I both know extremely well. Good heavens, the oil market is very volatile. I think we knew that to start with.
All right, thanks, Michael. Let's go to China, and very worrying or concerning news from there, particularly with regards to the outcome following the relaxed COVID rules. Beijing is said to have a widespread COVID situation there. We also see that in parts of China, stockpiling has become a challenge as there's been a rush for stocks in supermarkets. As I saw pictures of empty shelves there, reminiscent of the early days of COVID, when across the world, even things like toilet paper was scarce at supermarkets. What's the way forward? Do you think the Chinese government would rethink, or perhaps it's no going back on their relaxed laws on COVID?
I mean, from all the indications that we're seeing, it looks as though they're not in control of what's going on. And they certainly gave in from their zero COVID policy when they realized the social unrest was the worst since President Xi took power all those years ago. So I just don't think they're in control of it. And as I said in my report, there are worries that the relaxation will cause a spread of COVID-19. I mean, it's one of those kind of things. There's no such thing as zero COVID. It will always be there in its different kinds of forms. It's a question of learning to live with it and learning to depress it as much as possible. And personal hygiene and hygiene in eating and hygiene in public places, is very, very important as far as that's concerned. And what's happened is that the Chinese have attempted to do all sorts of things to stop people moving around, to see that they do move around. They've got to say whether they've been in contact with people with COVID and so on. And the populace just doesn't like it. It's had enough. Thank you very much indeed. Had nearly 3 years of all this and really wants to get on. And that's being reflected very much in the way that the government is approaching it. I'm sort of with you. You can only go with the pictures, and the pictures suggest to me that they're not in control of what's happening.
Okay, very quickly. I mean, across the Atlantic on both sides, it looks like with regard to what you call orthodoxy, both the U.S. Central Bank and in the European zone, the position is the same about inflation, that they need to continue to rein in inflation, whatever it takes. But in England specifically, I'd like you to take us through what is likely to be the impact of the 50 basis points increase, the 9th consecutively, the highest in about 14 years, on mortgage, on small and medium-scale businesses, on Christmas, in fact, which is beginning to look really bad in the UK. And then, of course, whether indeed, as some people have argued, that this orthodoxy that we talk about with regard to how to rein in inflation is an attack on the working class. Do you think it is? Then second, Elon Musk Elon Musk is making Twitter so volatile, so unpredictable, so unstable. He came in saying he will be a free speech absolutist. But now he's imposing sheer draconian measures, an attack on free speech. So why did he buy it in the first place if he was going to do exactly the same thing that he was condemning? Some journalists from CNN, New York Times have had their account suspended. The young man, the 20-year-old man in Jack Sweeney in Florida, who runs at ElonJet, he too he has had his account suspended. And our free speech absolutist is now talking about safety and so much contradiction. And then, of course, there are women in Twitter who are going against him, saying that he's also gender insensitive. And finally, the U.S. now had a chance to go and check the books, the auditors' books of companies, Chinese companies, operating on the stock market in the U.S. Is that really a major breakthrough, or it is nothing we should take, it's something we should not take seriously?
So you were asking about interest rates in England. I presume you mean the UK by that, not England. You mean England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So the United Kingdom. Yes? Yeah. Okay. It'll be very difficult. I think shoppers are very wary. I think it'll be a very thin Christmas. And again, it may be that what was being said yesterday, and I'm not sure this is true, but the governor of the Bank of England was saying there was a suspicion that inflation might have peaked, given that inflation fell very, very slightly the day before yesterday, but only very, very slightly indeed. I think it's going to be very, very tough. I see no way forward. The thing is that when the demand for mortgages actually picks up again, as it surely will, because it always does, then I suspect rates will become more competitive. But until then, I think we're in for a very, very tough year. As far as Elon Musk is concerned, I cannot give any sensible answer to what he does. I mean, if you really want to know what's going on, I would shift your attention to Germany, where a court has said that it doesn't care whether Elon Musk or Twitter is actually responsible for the tweets on Twitter. The company itself must trace down the perpetrators of offensive tweets and actually deal with them. Now, this is really, really severe stuff. This is what the price of freedom of free speech is. You can have it if you want to, but you're going to come up against countries like Germany, Italy, France, maybe even the UK, certainly within the EU. It's not actually made up its mind as how it's going to regulate Twitter. And certainly the United States hasn't either. So as a hub of free speech, sounds great, but life isn't great. Life isn't like that, is it?
Okay. Well, you didn't want to comment on the US getting an opportunity to look at the books, the auditors' books of Chinese companies.
This is very difficult indeed as well, isn't it? This is another real problem that they've got. On the one hand, they're clamping down on the entity list. They're adding more Chinese companies which use AI and use and use semiconductors within that list. Number one. On the other hand, what they want to do is to actually have greater access. They want their inspectors to actually go to China to have a look at the way the companies that in the United States might be dealing with are going to be are actually made up, and they want to be able to audit them. Now, you can't have it both ways. I think these are the complications of the trade talks coming out. I thought what you were going to ask me was, how on earth is there any policy over all this? And my answer to that question is there isn't one. I mean, it's a question of, on the one hand, they want to cut down on China's ability to use semiconductors for their American semiconductors for their military use, but at the same time, the United States want to inspect the companies they might well not be dealing with. It gets very complicated, doesn't it? I have no answer to it.
Well, I mean, hypocrisy on all fronts, it would seem. Well, thank you very much, Michael Olsen. Now for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Udiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, we begin with the summit, U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit that has concluded. We talked about deals. The White House is saying that a total of $15 billion worth of deals have been signed. But again, it's across the continents. Project Africa, the project there to improve trade. Not sure why we're talking about inflation. Yeah, let's stick with the U.S. deals with Africa. So just sticking with that, $15 billion in total. There was the Project Africa deal, which is supposed to improve trade with the African continent. There was also the digital initiatives that we talked about. So this is coming essentially from the White House. So, you know, what the individual countries each come back with is a different story. But in total, this is what the U.S. has said, in total, what has been signed over those last 3 days. So that's that. So now we move to inflation, and in Nigeria, figures that came out yesterday. So headline inflation, 21.47 as opposed to 21.09 year on year back in October. We moved to food inflation, the headline figure there. That's also climbed to 24.13. I think it was 23.17 or so in October. Then you've got core inflation. Not sure what the figure was back in October, but it was pretty close. Anyway, it's 18.24. This is when you remove the volatile items in there. Now, there is a question as to whether or not Nigeria's inflation figures are okay. As we know, Ghana is at 50%, right? And they are our neighbors, right? We trade and so on and so forth. There was a conversation that I had with Bismarck Rawane a few months ago when we talked about the accuracy of the inflation figures. We'll summarize what he said, but I just want you to take a listen to that conversation. An excerpt.
There are two things here. One, there's a question of data integrity, which Nigeria has not been known to be a unique example of integrity, not only in data, but in every other thing. So
Yes.
we have our reputation, which lives ahead of us in so many respects. So that's one. Two is the fact that the inflation basket is supposed to be reconstituted every 5 years. Naturally, your behavioral patterns, your demography, in fact, your life expectancy and all of that.
Yeah.
So the last time changes over time. Therefore, you need to reflect that in terms of changing your consumer basket.
Okay.
Even if it's just tweaking it a little bit. But the last time we did that was 2009. So quite frankly, going by the 5-year cycle, we are due for a third review, but we haven't done anything about it.
Yeah.
So what we sought to do at Financial Derivatives was to look at the basket as it was constituted in 2009 and try to rudimentarily just alter the basket.
Yeah.
You know, crude alteration, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And when we use the basket, right, of the NBS, it came out at 18.6. By the way, our projection is that it's going to come out at 19 point something using that. But then when we try to reconstitute it, it showed about 45.64.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so big difference. That's one. Two, then we went further, because that's even using their own basket. We went further to do what we call a synthetic basket. The synthetic basket now tells us something much more frightening, which came out about 84%.
Good Lord.
But again, you know, you're comparing the price of a product last year with the price of a product this year.
Right.
What is more important is that even using their own basket and using the monthly inflation, because if you're looking at the price of a bag of rice last month and this month is more reflective of reality.
All right, so again, just to summarize the issues with what we have right now, the basket as we know it's the inflation basket that aggregates the different price points needs to be reconstituted every 5 years. And the last time that was done was in 2009. Also, coming out of that interview, Mr. Rawane was saying that exchange rate has about a 70% impact, 70% of our inflation because of the fact that we are so import dependent. And you think about, you know, fuels and so on and so forth, that also has to be taken into. So just to reiterate, the model that they ran using a reconstituted basket of the NBS's own numbers comes out to 47%. That is just their own scenario. Then when you that's your own basket. When you now use according to the synthetic basket he talked about, it comes out to 84%. Here's a tweet from Steve Hanke. He's a professor of applied economics at the Johns Hopkins University. Johns Hopkins, as we know, is who we use as a source for tracking COVID. And this was in early December. So when President Buhari first came into office, he promised to deliver economic growth in Nigeria. The only thing that's grown is inflation. And then he said in this week's inflation table, that was back on early December, takes the Nigeria 6th place. He has his own review. And he says we're at 51.2%. So, in addition to not having, 2-year-old unemployment data that is not updated, we really have to have a conversation with the Bureau of Statistics on reconstituting that basket and making it more reflective of where things are in terms of consumption patterns. And the fact that when you look at your rice, fuel, diesel is up 300% in a year. A bag of rice is up, triple digits. Is that correctly reflected? And I know it's a law of averages when they take surveys. So anyway, we round up with the Minister of Finance saying that debts owed to Nigeria amount to about 5.2 trillion naira. This was at a forum that took place, I believe it was in Minna. It was just a couple quotes from her. She was represented by the head of special projects at the Ministry of Finance. Said the ministry, through the consolidation efforts of the debt analytics and reporting application, has been able to aggregate monumental debts of approximately 5.2 trillion. These debts came to the spotlight from data aggregated from over 5,000 debtors across 10 MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies. The debt aggregation effort is still ongoing. She continues and says that these debts are in the form of debt liabilities to the Federal Inland Revenue Service, refunds to the government by companies who fail to deliver on projects for which payments has been effected, unpaid credit facilities granted to both corporate entities and individuals by the Bank of Industry and Bank of Agriculture, judgment debts in favor of the government, debts owed to pension transition, and so on and so forth. If you got that much money hanging out there, I think there should be an effort done to correct
real
it.
quickly, I think that's why the MBS should come out to Nigerians and let's know what the models
inflation, right?
they're using.
Yeah.
Because see, we need to be able to get the exact amount of inflation, not masking anything, so that we can plan and know how to inject solutions to solve the problem. And if Bismarck Rewane says, and the financial derivative says that based on the MBS's modeling, they're getting 50%, all right? And based on also other modeling, they're getting over 80%, then can we have an average of models?
Right.
To be able to get a middle ground, to even know the exact amount of inflation. What does it feel like in the pockets of people? What's the astronomical cost? Because I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were telling me something that cost them 500,000 naira, just the space of last year has gone up to about 1 million. So let us get the real numbers.
And that's a 100% increase.
That's
right?
a 100% increase. So let us get the real number. And this is not the time to mask any number. This is the time to be honest, with Nigerians. And also, for the life of me, we need to get those job unemployment numbers.
That's the killer. That one is the real killer.
It's been third quarter 2020.
Fourth
quarter 2020.
Well, it's 2 years now.
So 2 years running. It is not good not to get unemployment numbers 2 years running. We need to get those numbers once and for all.
Good luck trying to get those numbers before an election. Right? Good luck trying to get job numbers right before an election. You know the opposition party will pounce on it and say that they haven't created. They promised 3 million jobs, right? They promised 3 million jobs.
Something, Rotus.
Yeah.
We must start to think beyond this opposition and position politics. See, politicians think of the next election. Leaders think of the next generation. It is time for us to start having leaders. If you are truly a leader, you will not think of just to win this election. You think of how you can grow the next generation. Let's start thinking of the next generation. It is politics that has put us where we are in today.
Absolutely. Now, just speaking to that, and when you were giving the report, Rotus, my mind went back to the fact that the moment I saw the report, the first thing that came to my mind was, I hope the statistics are accurate. So you talking about your interview with Mr. Bismarck Rewane, just put paid to what, and it's quite unfortunate that there's such a lack of trust in figures coming from the National Bureau of Statistics, not founded, I must say, not founded, except of course in terms of the review of the basket. However, the danger of this is that if we don't have correct figures, how are we planning for the economy?
Right.
Is this what the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning is using for their policies or programs. If these are the figures being used, then obviously it will not achieve the desired impact. And obviously, perhaps that's why we're saying that, we keep hearing trader money, this intervention, yet it's not achieving the desired effects because the foundation in itself is faulty, is not, quite accurate. And this is why, just to draw out the importance of having accurate figures and not running away from the reality of our economic prosperity or lack thereof. Then talking about the $15 billion investment, we said on a semi-light note when we were the first few days of the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit about a time where we're looking forward to a time when we would have Africa-U.S. Summit, where Africa will host the world, since there's such an attention on the world. And it took me back to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement area, and the fact, and it was, let me read a statement by the released by the U.S. Following this summit. The AfCFTA, which would be the world's biggest free trade zone by area when it kicks into full gear in 2030. 1.3 billion people with a combined gross domestic product of $2.6 trillion. 1st of January 2023 will mark 2 years anniversary of the signing of the agreement. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the desired progress or effect that we thought we would in Africa. We often say that there's so much potential in Nigeria, but I would extend that to say as well that in Africa, we are losing a potential that the rest of the world are seeing. Hence this race for coming and having, sessions, trying to come to have sessions with Africa. We are not yet tapping the full potential. Out of 55 countries, only 45 have submitted a tariff proposal. We have not all countries have signed the agreement, have ratified, and this is 2 years afterwards. What is the problem? Why are we not leveraging this excellent, facility? So this is something for us to think about here in Africa.
Okay, what are the issues, in my view? Inflation is now 21.47%. But when you break it down further, in terms of states, you see that Ebonyi State is even much higher. Kogi State is even much higher. River State is 24.45%. When you look at urban inflation is much higher. When you look at rural inflation, it is much higher. When you look at food inflation is already 24.13%. So what we have is just the aggregate of 21.47%. Now, these differences will be measured in terms of the erosion of purchasing power, the higher cost of goods and services in this environment. And I'm sure that everybody can attest to the fact of the rampaging epidemic of empty pockets and empty stomachs in Nigeria and the higher cost of living. Now, you have raised the question about the accuracy of the figures. The Steve Hanke that you referred to, the professor at JHU, if I said that a month ago, right? So it wasn't in relation to November figures, which means that if Hanke is right, whatever basket he is using to do his own measurement, different from what the National Bureau of Statistics is using, it could even be worse. We may even be in a worse situation than Ghana that we talked about yesterday. However, it is important that at least we have some figures to work with. Because once upon a time, that National Bureau of Statistics was not functioning. We had no figures. We were complaining in this country about planning without data. But what we know are the basic issues. The fact that the cost of production is very high, that purchasing power is very poor, that we are an import-dependent country. These are basic facts, whatever percentage the economists want to talk about. We also know that inflation is so real that the Central Bank of Nigeria has been trying to deal with it with a number of monetary policy issues. But those monetary policy issues did not work because of the increase in money supply within the economy and the distortions within the financial system. And that was why in October, the CBN came up with this redesign of the Naira policy and attempts to define withdrawal threshold, and all of that is starting today, and new notes. Okay, so if those policies have not worked, what is next? And that is why, managing inflation is the major task ahead of whoever becomes president and his team in 2023. But I've also seen some comments by some concerned economists saying that tightening monetary policy further may not be the solution. And I'm quoting Muda Yusuf, who was reported in the papers today, saying, look, there are other things we need to do. And in terms of other things we need to do, maybe we need to look, and I don't know what your opinion is, in the direction of some of the statements made yesterday by the new head of the World Bank, the economists, the country economists of the World Bank in Nigeria. And he was making specific recommendations. He said, for example, that Nigeria has to move away from central bank financing to get revenue. That's ways and means, which we have complained about on this program. He said subsidy has to go. Because with the subsidy regime jumping from 4 trillion to over 9 trillion, Nigeria cannot sustain it. And I know you are a subsidy...
I'm anti-subsidy.
You are against it. Okay. And then, of course, he said we need to get, a unified exchange rate and all of those issues. So who is listening? These are political candidates that are just fixated on empty promises rather than rigorous thinking about how to move Nigeria forward. And the worst people are those, vuvuzelas that they have employed who have neither brain nor sense. And who just spend half of the time abusing people.
And tagging us.
So I think we have to focus on the issues. And these are some of the serious issues that we have to focus on. How do we rescue this economy? Otherwise, we'll wake up next year and this inflation rate you are talking about will be over 80%. We'll be in a Sri Lanka situation. Common sense is what the World Bank economists advise. Indeed. And there's a shortage of it right now in Nigeria.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Roses.
Well, thank you very much, Roses. We'll take a short break now. And when we return, we'll be talking to Professor Ndubisi Nwokoma, Director, Center for Economic Policy Analysis and Research at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
As you adjust to the new realities for operating your business and engaging with your customers, let us help you transform your business into a digital powerhouse capable of adapting and taking advantage of today's opportunities. With our best-in-class array of digital solutions, you can conduct your business, receive payments from your customers, and perform transactions quickly, safely, and conveniently, because we've got you covered with the right people, technology, and service offerings. Contact us today and let us take your business to its zenith. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
I'm about to serve better breakfast.
If you're in Lagos, you need to see this.
I'm not just streaming content, I'm just escaping traffic.
Get more data to enjoy exclusive content. Dial *141# now.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
Patricia, crypto made easy.
Emergencies happen when you least expect them to. It gets worse when you are cash strapped. No need to despair. First Advance has you covered. You can get that urgent cash right now on First Advance. With First Advance, salary earners can get up to 50% of their salary. No hassles. As long as you earn a monthly salary and your salary account has been active for at least 2 months. It doesn't matter if you run a salary account with First Bank or any other bank. Just dial star 894 star 11 hash or simply dial star 894 hash on your mobile phone. What's more, when you open a First Bank salary account, you can enjoy 0 charges and free debit card issuance. Download the First mobile app on Play Store or App Store today. Log in to experience First Bank digital banking. Select loans, select First Advance, and follow the prompts to receive your loan. Don't let that urgent need get the best of you. Get First Advance now. It's as simple as dialing star 894 star 11 hash. First Advance. Fast, convenient, secure. You first. First Bank.
Lagos has amassed more wealth than any other state in the country to be the most comfortable city to live in.
Now Lagos is earning 51 billion naira every month.
But even with all that money, this is the Lagos you have now. Bad roads filled with potholes, poor drainage system resulting in floods during rainy season, incessant traffic congestions, increased environmental pollution, poor healthcare system, large-scale child begging, poor security and increased crime rate, impunity of state government officials, lack of clean drinking water, poor transportation system. After years of empty promises, Lagos is now rated as the second worst city to live in the world. How long shall we continue like this? Lagos is not working. We want our Lagos back. Vote Dr. Abdulaziz Olajide Adediran Jandor as governor of Lagos State. Jafueko, fight for Lagos.
PDP, power to the people.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. The U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, which kicked off on the 13th of December 2022, has come to an end. The summit focused on the vital role of civil society and the strength of the African diaspora communities in the United States. It featured a range of sessions on topics from trade and investment to health and climate change to peace, security, governance to space cooperation. Speaking to African leaders, President Joe Biden said the United States is all in on Africa's future, and he announced new trade opportunities and infrastructure commitments, including for clean energy and the digital economy. President Biden also announced billions of dollars in support and investment for Africa at his summit with the continent's heads of state. The summit is seen as an American attempt to reassert its influence in Africa to counter Chinese involvement. Joining us on this show this morning, as we discuss the gains of this year's Summit for Africa, is Professor Ndubisi Nwokoma, Director, Center for Economic Policy Analysis and Research at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome to the morning show, Professor Nwokoma. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, Prof, they say, well, you know that common saying that charity begins at home. Before we begin to talk about the U.S.-African Leaders Summit, let's talk about this latest news, which we've just been discussing, about the latest inflation figures in Nigeria. Inflation figures now 21.4%, increase of 6.07% since November 2021. And the concern is, how come the CBN has not been able to rein in inflation despite all those monetary policies introduced? And now we have had to address money supply by redesigning the higher denomination Naira notes. What can anybody do about inflation in Nigeria? More so, as some economists are saying, where further tightening monetary policy may not help.
In my view, I think the Naira redesign actually contributed to this level of inflation in Nigeria. Because when the announcement to get the Naira redesigned came up, there was a serious pressure in the foreign exchange market. And you discovered that those who hoarded Naira were actually now taking their Naira to buy dollars. And you see that the exchange rate actually deteriorated. The Naira lost value. From about 600 Naira to $1, it came up to about 700, 800, even approaching 900. So all those affected the prices that are linked to the exchange rate, other prices, because people talk about exchange rate is increasing, particularly imported goods. You discovered that many of the items actually became more expensive. So the Naira redesign affected other prices, and that also made the inflation rate to actually get worse. So that can be linked to the actions of central bank, even though they tighten monetary policy and they increase the MPR, but the other policy that they carried that also helped to worsen the situation. So they need to be more cautious in their policy framework from going forward. If not, we keep on worsening inflation in Nigeria.
All right, thank you, Professor Nwokoma. So from your assertion, perhaps the monetary policy recently released by the Central Bank of Nigeria is counterproductive. In your view, what should the CBN be doing? What are some of your recommendations in your view? And then I'd like you to also speak to the what we just spoken about a few minutes ago around the authenticity or perhaps the genuinity of the figures that have been released by the NBS. Going by what some experts have said as to the baskets being used, the parameters, what's your thoughts on that?
I think the central bank should be more cautious. That's the very first thing, because the policies that they brought out in October to get the Naira redesigned, that to me, did create some problems. And like I said earlier, then this idea of cash withdrawal limits also contentious and also controversial. So going forward, the CBN should be more careful, knowing that we are going into an election coming in the next 2-3 months, thereabouts. 2 months by February. And when you begin to churn out policies that actually are working against each other and try to tighten to make inflation worsen, because when you say you get the Naira redesigned so close to elections, even it has its own good side, there's a lot of hoarding of money outside the banking system, and that money found its way into the FX market. So they need to be more cautious. That is the advice I think I should give for the CBN to take. The other one is that there are other indicators that show that government needs to be careful. At the fiscal side, federal government actually has not been disciplined in that area. Expenditures that are not necessary are being carried out by the federal government. Increase in ways and means advances. So all these ones help to worsen the level of inflation in Nigeria. So CBN has a very key role to play. Even though they keep on tightening the rates, keep on increasing the rates, tightening monetary cash and all that, making credit difficult to get. But other policy frameworks should not be counterproductive, or else we'll just be bringing out policies that actually are working against each other. So there's need for government, for CBN to revisit the last two policies and make sure that they don't worsen the macroeconomic indicators as they currently stand.
Okay, so what would you rather the CBN does to be able to fight inflation? They've made the argument that they've thrown in everything and it's not working. The reason why they redesigned Naira was because money velocity issues. It was not coming back, too much cash in the hands of people. They needed to call that in. At the same time, they are putting limits in to be able to curb that circulation of the currency. Also, one step further, they are pushing interest rates up. which a lot of people are doing in the world, they'll argue with you that even despite the fact inflation is coming down in America, the Fed is still raising interest rates. So what would you rather we do at a point in time like this?
Yes. I think CBN should have made more time available for these changing policies. For example, you want to get the Naira redesigned. You had the announcement in October, late October. And then by December 15th, you have a new Naira, some new notes coming up. I think the time was short. And that's the pressure, like I said, which affected other markets, was actually so devastating. So what I think CBN should do is caution. And secondly, some people have questioned the data being churned out by CBN or even by the NBS about what the rates are, about the level of money outside the banking system. There has been this kind of caution that CBN says that we have about 80% of the currency outside the banking system. People have said, is that really so? If it is so, why are the effects? Did they not properly take a look at the consequences of that policy? Because the consequence actually took everybody by surprise. Even the CBN itself, when you have a plan to get the Naira redesigned, and then the aftermath, it's so damaging to the economy. And that is why you can see inflation. So the data itself, people need to interrogate the data and also interrogate the speed at which you are implementing the policy. I think when you want to make such a policy that has such great consequences, you need to take time and actually consult other stakeholders so that they can look at all the sides to the policy and its effects and see how we can try to minimize the negative effects on the economy. Because the ordinary man is now at the receiving end for all this. People cannot buy the goods the way the price they made the goods maybe yesterday. And you find that inflation is getting worse. And with the February edition coming up, elections coming up, I wonder whether we may have worse figures for inflation. Because the way we are going, bringing out policies in quick succession, and each of them having some negative effects, I think CBN should be more cautious, should try to take a look at this data properly and make sure that what is being told to the public is actually what it is. And then try to let a policy simmer down before you now bring up another one. If not, you keep on working against yourself. That's my opinion on this issue. So we need to address inflation, but we do it with caution. CBN should be more cautious and minimize the speed in trying out new policies.
Okay, Prof, having tried to address that matter about latest inflation figures in Nigeria, now let's talk about the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. There have been many views about it. Some people say this is a case of America trying to grab more space in Africa, given the fact that Japan has shown interest in Africa, France, China, as if this is the second scramble for Africa, a throwback to 1885. But what do you think in terms of the significance of the just concluded U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit? Do you think that summit had focused appropriately, as some people requested, on African interests rather than American interests? And will African leaders be able to get that African interest realized?
Yes, I think, in my opinion, it is largely in America's interest because they are all scrambling. America is trying to play catch-up. In February, the European Union has about a $171 billion investment plan for Africa. Now, the U.S. is now talking about $55 billion over 3 years for Africa. There are plans by China. Also, China has actually spent so much money in Africa. The African Union building in Ethiopia was built by China. China has assisted many African countries with so much credit. Zambia, Kenya, Nigeria, many countries actually have gone to China because China, does not really care about human rights issues. They care more about development. They don't care whether you are a dictator or whatever, which the West does. They care, put your house in order, human rights issues and all that, but China does not. So China has been able to gain so much inroads into Africa significantly. So what America is doing is trying to play catch-up. Particularly what happened in the last regime under Donald Trump, where Africa was actually, people say, insulted or bastardized. So Joe Biden is trying to play catch-up, trying to make sure that Africa is not left out. And also the vote at the UN concerning Ukraine and Russia, only about 10 African countries, or out of 54, voted in support of trying to sanction Russia. Only 10. Some of them abstained. Some of them voted against it. So there is fire on the mountain for America. They feel that they are losing out. China is actually investing all over the place. African countries are not very happy with America. And you can see, even in Nigeria, you can see the issue of visas were tightened for Nigerians going to America. Now it's been relaxed. If you have this Dropbox arrangement, it's now 48 months after expiration. So America is trying to play catch-up. So all that, America says that it is being left out in the equation. China, the EU, they are taking positions. So in my opinion, what happened in the US, the summit, is basically trying to say, hey, we are still here. America is your friend. And they will see what we can do. Is playing catch-up. It's a scramble for Africa, and Africa should actually get the best out of all these proposals, but also be cautious that they all want you, not because they love you, but because they want to make sure they cover their flanks and they work in their best interest. That's my view on that.
Thank you for your response. And just as you ended that, in terms of who is favored of the two, U.S. and Africa, the U.S., of course, is what is out for their own interests more than Africa's interests, as it's obvious. Now, you mentioned also Africa leveraging this opportunity and also going with an agenda and also putting forward their own interests. I'd like to ask you, in what ways can we practically, as a continent, ensure that we come to the table as well with our own interest strategy so that we come out even coming out of such a summit more prosperous? And then talking about prosperity, following the end of the summit, the 3-day summit, it said that the U.S. has pledged $15 billion in trade deals, notably the $170 million for Power Africa and the likes. Some analysts have said that this isn't good enough. Bearing in mind this new, trying to court Africa, build stronger trade relationships with Africa and strengthening their powers. Do you think, or in your view, what's your take on that? And then how else, or how much more, if you think it's not enough, should the U.S. be investing, and what areas?
Yes, thank you very much. If you take a look at Africa and at the key problems in Africa, one is poor governance, poor economic governance particularly. That is why you have this issue of unemployment. It's very critical. And many young persons are leaving the continent. They are going abroad because there are no jobs. So whatever help we can get to create jobs at home is very critical. Many young men are leaving. Some even go through Libya because there are no jobs. So whatever policy, whatever we can leverage on to bring in business, to create jobs within. But we cannot really create jobs if you have poor economic governance. And that's also good that Joe Biden met with about 6 countries in Africa that are going to have their elections very soon. Because if you don't get your politics right, you can't get your economics right. In every politics, there is economics. So for us to talk about creating jobs at home, we need to get our politics right, get the elections right, so that the person that can actually move our economies forward are those who are on board. So the issue of unemployment, whatever help we can get through attracting investments from the U.S., we need to try to leverage on that significantly, jobs. Then governance, like we said, the issue about making sure that we have sound macroeconomic policies. If you don't do that, we keep on going around in circles, and we don't help our youths who need a good future from their leaders. Trade in Africa is very, very important. What Africa needs is trade. not aid. And so the program put in place, the Prosper Africa program, of 2018, which was put together by the last regime before Joe Biden, we need to pursue that. The Africa Growth Opportunity Act, the AGOA program, need to be extended. The program will soon expire in the next 3 years. So we need to talk about trade, because what helps the continent is trade. Even in the area of aid, the American and other OECD countries have not been able to meet the target of 0.7% of GNI, of gross income. They've not been able to meet those targets. So the aid that we need from them is not even forthcoming. And the trend now is more on South-South cooperation, where you have emerging certain powers like Brazil, like China, which are coming up. And the West has felt threatened. So what Africa can do, one, leverage on the opportunities for trade, because trade helps you much more than aid. Secondly, whatever help in area of investment to reduce the level of unemployment is very, very critical. Then thirdly, to leverage on how we can have good elections, address the issue of economic governance, getting the right leaders to help you as a country, as in the different countries, to make sure the economy is run properly. If we're able to work on these areas, governance, employment, and be able to address the issue, even health also, it will help us as a country to leverage. So any help from the U.S. in these areas will be very, very welcome.
But the problem has always been that because we don't have capacity on the African continent, trade is always skewed. The fact that out of the 15 billion that the White House said we signed in contracts recently, Africa and the US, most of the technical capacity are domiciled abroad, and the money still goes back to the American economy. What can we do to improve technical development right here that makes money come back to us? I'll give you an example. Most of the celebrated Nigerian tech companies we have today are all registered in Delaware in America. Because for you to be able to raise capital, you must show that you have a certain foothold in America. And you know what that means as regards implication for revenues that might have been gained. How do we increase that technical trust here?
Well, what we can do is to try, because the lender also always has the upper hand, or the one who's trying to has the upper hand. What we can do is to enhance our capacity in these areas. Capacity. We need to enhance capacity of our young persons to be able to provide skilled labor, so that whenever these investment programs or plans come in, we can get a piece of the action. And that is why I also welcome the proposal by President Joe Biden to make the AU a member of G20, or to push for it. Because if you're not at the table, you will not be able to discuss the core issues. You're either at the table or you are on the menu. Currently, Africa is on the menu. They discuss you, they eat, they discuss, everybody wants to take a part of Africa, China, but we want to be at the table. In line with the Monterrey Consensus, the key areas of the meeting held in Monterrey, in Mexico many years ago, the key areas, one of the areas of Monterrey is like, we need to address the systemic issues as regards to global development. And one of them is for you to be at the table. If you're not at the table, they give you whatever they want to give you, which they give you the jobs, they bring in the skilled labor, the money flows back to the country that is the donor countries. But if you are at the table, you cannot begin to have to negotiate on good terms. So that proposal by Joe Biden to push for Africa to be a member of the G20 is very, very important. Because if you don't do that, they give you the jobs, bring in their skilled labor, get the jobs, and the money flows back. Let us be at the table. Monterrey has about six key areas. The Monterrey Consensus. One is in the area of enhancing your domestic resources. Secondly, about trade, which is very critical. We discussed trade. The other one is about foreign capital inflows. like we know the bulk of the money many African countries now live on, coming from remittances, FDIs, private investment coming from abroad. Then the issue of debt is very, very critical. Many countries now, like Nigeria, are getting into some serious debt crisis. These are areas that we need help in which, if we are at the table, the other area is in the area of ODA. Like we said, many of the OECD countries don't meet up with their ODA targets, commitments. However, what we can push for is to remind President Joe Biden we should be at the table. The systemic issues about global development they should put Africa in the forefront. And if we are at the table, we will not be at the receiving end all the time. At least we'll have some little some gains in these areas. And that will be to everybody's benefit, particularly for the young Africans who don't see any hope in the continent. They're all migrate, even though they bring in money as remittances. But at least we need to create jobs within the continent to be able to help our development.
Okay, Prof. The Americans use this same summit to make statements about democracy in Africa. Number one, out of the 54 countries in Africa, they invited only about 49, excluded those countries where there have been coups or conflict in the last 1 year in the continent. Then President Biden, as you pointed out earlier on, met with 6 African leaders whose countries will be having elections next year, Nigeria inclusive. And of course, spokesperson to President Buhari, Garba Shehu, has issued a statement in which he said President Biden reserved special praise for President Buhari for supporting democracy, for his performance in office, for not seeking a third term, and how he has made Nigeria a model for democracy. Do you think that praise is deserved?
Well, neither here nor there, in my opinion. Neither here nor there, because in some respects, you can say that for some state elections that has been conducted in recent times, there's been little interference by the federal authorities. And but there are still gaps. There are still gaps. Many persons that can vote will not be able to vote. I don't see any reason why your national ID card cannot be enough for you to vote. There are areas there are still so many gaps that democracy is not thriving as we would expect it to thrive in Nigeria. And President Buhari can still do a lot more, to have a lasting legacy for himself. That there should be no interference in the forthcoming elections. There should be no effort to remove the beavers. Because some people have been clamoring for that. Let us do it the old way, because either they feel threatened that they will not win or whatever. There should be he should not budge. He should make sure that whoever wins is allowed to take office. He has done a little. He can do a lot more. So I don't think the praise is. I will support the total praise as being stated by Garba Shehu, but I think we can give him some credit in some local elections, some measure of, like Anambra, for example, like Osun, where the opposition have actually won power. So I think we can give him some credit, but he can do a lot more. And the one that I think he should do, which everybody will forgive him of all his sins, is the forthcoming elections. If there's no interference, if they make sure those who can vote actually vote, they address the issue of security, people can go to the polling units and cast their votes without being killed. So if he can make sure that happens, I think all those other sins we've been talking about here that he committed, many people will want to forget, and he will leave behind for himself a very good legacy. So he has done a little. He can do a lot, much more than he has done.
All right, thank you. Still talking about the economy and looking at some of the outcomes of the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. One of the things that President Biden had said in this conversation was to promote and support African nations in moving away from being primarily import-driven, especially with regards to the trade relationship between Africa and, in this case, Nigeria and the U.S., to being, to promoting more export. On the sidelines of the AGOA, that's the African Growth and Opportunity Act. In what way do you think Nigeria can tap into this act and expand our exports, especially to diversify away from just oil to other, other commodities in the nation?
Yeah, thank you very much. For us to expand our exports, we need to address the issue of infrastructure, which is very, very critical, because what we export now are basic commodities: oil, raw cocoa, raw Africa generally, raw coffee, and all that. And for you to add value, you need to talk of investment in industrialization. For you to be able to offer a different set of commodities to the global economy, you can't expand your exports by just talking about it. You need to do something about investing in infrastructure. There's no power. There are no roads. There's no, a place like Lagos, there used to be water, pipe-borne water in Lagos about 20 years ago. They don't have that. Everybody has its own borehole. There's no security. So if you don't invest in that, how can the manufacturer produce? How can you now export to other countries? And then your goods will compete in price. So what America can do is to extend AGOA. AGOA will expire in the next 3 years. AGOA, which gives Africa preferential trade access to the American market. They need to extend AGOA for about 10 years or more, so that we can put our acts in order in the area of infrastructure to produce fabrics, textile industry, to others like aquatic cloth, adire and all that. We can export this, but we need to have market access, at least to the American market, so that we will be able to sell, expand, extend AGOA. And then the program, Prosper Africa of Trade, we need to ask them to give us some more concessions in that area. While we are trying to address the issue of infrastructure here, we also ask for these kind of leverages from the US. Once that is done, we can now expand our exports. Unless it is done, we keep on talking about oil sector, because the bulk of the money we earn as foreign exchange comes from oil. We need to address these issues, ask for more concessions, and invest more in our infrastructure, and then we can export manufactured goods. Even if we don't even go to the US, we can even start from our neighbors. But the US is a very, very big market. Africa needs to actually exploit. So extend AGOA beyond the expiry date, and it will help us as a continent.
But a lot of people argue that AGOA has been on for a while. We've not done anything with it. Is it overnight we want to fix all our problems? We all remember how Trump wanted to stop AGOA at a point before it was finally renewed. So even if you extend AGOA, does that solve our own internal problems of not being able to do what it is? Professor, as at 1898, 1899, the same way the French and the British used to take products out of Africa in raw form is still the way we are taking products out of Africa in 2022. No single add-on. Hence my initial question on technical capacity development. Another question I'd like to ask you about all of this, our partnership, is how are we going to back up with our own local capital? Because when you look at it, the Yorubas have a saying that it is the man that has money that has the business. Where is our own local capital to be able to provide these services here? We can't keep going cap in hand to beg. Where is our own local capital coming from?
Yes, thank you very much. Like I said earlier, the critical problem is about governance. I said earlier that also in every politics there is economics. And the reason why we are in this problem is like Nigeria has had this issue of a leadership challenge over the years. And unless we get that right, and that is why even in the summit, America knows that unless you have good elections where you have the right people emerging, these problems will keep on going around in circles. And with the next 10 years, we'll be saying the same thing we are saying today. Because we have those who come in, they just maintain the status quo. We don't develop capacity. We don't develop our infrastructure. We keep on, we just be business as usual. And that is why we keep on saying the same thing over the years. What, in my opinion, we should be thinking of is to focus a lot on getting our politics right. Very, very critical. like people have said, and I share that view, that Africa's problem are basically leadership, 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 primarily. Because if you don't get your economic governance right, we can't invest in infrastructure. Monies are diverted. We have the issues of corruption, which everybody is. We're all shouting about corruption. We have the issue of, we talk about inflation going on. Because we don't get our policies right, we don't get the right people doing these jobs, we don't get the person who has the political will. So that is the way we go. How did Singapore develop? How did Malaysia develop? South Korea, they did invest in education capacity. It's leadership, primarily. From third world to first world, we can see examples in Asia. So it is not like we're going to reinvent the wheel. We can see what happened in Asia. How was Singapore? Singapore was crying when Malaysia had to send it out of the federation. But look at Singapore today. Look at Malaysia. Look at the big difference. From third world, it's about leadership. So the idea of capacity, investment, what do we export? There has to be somebody who is visionary, a leader that can say this is where the country should be. Nigeria is operating below its potential because we don't get our politics right. And if we begin to operate by sentiments, operate by, oh, this is my brother, this is my turn, this is this, we will not get it right. We need to find out who can do this job. Make sure that we think of the next generation. Then all these other problems, they will be addressed. We have examples, like I mentioned, we have South Korea as an example. We have Hong Kong. We have Taiwan. We don't need to reinvent this wheel. Get our politics right. In my view, the issues we raise can be addressed.
Okay, Prof. We have just about 3 minutes to go. But before we go, we've been talking about the government-to-government side of it. But beyond that, there was also business-to-business, people-to-people interactions at that U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. What do you think of that in terms of value? Briefly, as we go.
Well, yes. I think there's also the need to engage the private sector. It's very, very critical. And I'm also aware that there have been this interaction amongst businessmen to make sure they're able to attract businesses to the continent, to be able to enhance what happens in the economy about job creation. So the commercial sector actually is very, very critical. Also issue of culture, cultural relation, traveling, visas, and so on. These are very, very important. And once that happens, the ordinary man will be positively impacted. That's my view.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Nwokoman, for joining us on The Morning Show today. We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll be talking to Johnson Chukwu, Chief Executive Officer of Cowrie Assets, and Oguchi Aguda, Chief Executive Officer of Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
A reflection of the Nigerian never say die spirit. They never stay down. You're always thinking of how to improve. You're always thinking of how to move forward. My name is Emmanuel Ahimieho. I've been a civil engineer for 18 years. I'm the project manager of Obajana Kaba Road. The Obajana Kaba Road is 43 kilometers built completely of concrete pavement. We started work on December 2016. I remember when we came here, it was virtually lifeless. We're building a road that we know will need very minimal maintenance. It's a road that we don't need to rush back to in 5 years, trying to carry out major maintenance work. We don't need to import anything that we need on the road. They are all locally available materials. All the cement we use on this road is from Dangote Cement Factory, which is the largest cement factory in Africa. The sand is from the communities, so people from the community, they end up becoming suppliers. Imagine supplying sand for a 43-kilometer road. It's a lot of money. There are things I've learned from building this concrete road that I never knew 10 years ago. and to be able to lead those people to achieve something worthwhile, something that is of value to them, to the community, to people who have never met us. And I am positive that the road will outlast most of the people who are building the road. Along this route, you have up to 12 communities. People have the confidence to open shops. Why? Because someone is going through the road, they sell their things, they sell their goods. That is more money for them. We have a number of eateries now, and you want to buy foods along the road, you get fresh food, not food that are preserved. No, you get fresh food. So it is good for us, and it's good for the community too. The road is a lot more safer now for everybody, including Halima, including other travelers. So they have better roads, lesser crime, shorter journey times, so a lot of advantages. I've had people who go through the roads and they stop to just say, well done. We are proud of what is happening here. We're happy that this is going on in Nigeria in our time. We can see it. They are proud of it. I think it has brought life back to the communities. I feel very proud, extremely proud being a part of this project.
This na Emeka. He like to dey keep money for her. As CBN deadline don dey near so. This one na wise Emeka. As he don hear say deadline dey near, he wan carry money go deposit for the right place with Access Bank.
It's time to spread your wings and fly. Reach for the sky.
Even if the bank too far, na to go to the nearest Access Closer agent. No carry last with your money.
Get up right now, right now.
Money wey you deposit for Access Bank, na money wey go make your mind rest well. Don't let the money spoil for your hand, oh. 10 million naira today, fit be 0 naira tomorrow. Oya o, Musa, Shade, Onyinye, carry your money go Access Bank or Access Closer agent wey near you. Access, more than banking.
As a player, there's nothing better than the roar of your crowd. But in Nigeria, there's a roar that may not be heard again. With fewer than 50 lions left, they could be extinct in the next few years, from loss of habitat and prey, and snares set for illegal bushmeat. So please, say no to illegal bushmeat. Let's keep the roar alive for Nigeria, because poaching steals from us all.
I'm about to serve better breakfast.
If you're in Lagos, you need to see this.
I'm not just streaming content, I'm just escaping traffic.
Get more data to enjoy exclusive content. Dial *141# now.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
New Naira notes? Don't panic. Here's what you need to know. Ensure to make deposits of all old banknotes before January 31, 2023. To make the process seamless for you, all Fidelity Bank branches will be open till 6 p.m. on weekdays and 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturdays to allow for cash deposits only. Also, please note that bank charges on all cash deposits have been suspended by the CBN. However, charges shall still be applied on cash withdrawals. The new banknotes can be accessed at any Fidelity Bank branch nationwide from December 15, 2022. Old banknotes will remain in circulation till January 31, 2023, when they will cease to be legal tender, as directed by the CBN. For more inquiries, follow us on our social media channels or email us at true.serve@fidelitybank.ng. You can also call 0700 3035 489 or reach us on WhatsApp on 090 3000 5252. Thank you for banking with us.
We are Fidelity. We keep our word.
Me and my guys see enter road, they flexing my brand new moto. My baby said she win the hobo. Festival of Joy Globe promo. And my fans get fans with them still we know. Even if light or fan, we go still go. Hey, wait. Now they don't carry lights. We the win, someone like us still show. It's the festival of Joy Globe promo. Fashion killer, dress code bigger. Win so we machine for the Glow Festival. But I just they win left, right and center. That's the 611 hash to enter. Festival of Joy. Oh yeah. Festival. That's the 611 hash to enjoy. Festival of Joy. Oh yeah. Festival. That's the 611 hash to enter.
Papa, mama, brother, sister, this Lagos must work for all of us. Everybody down for Eko.
Oh yes, Lagos people, papa, mama, sister, brother, auntie, plus including uncle them. Better don't land for Lagos State gidigba. Money will be for Lagos State, then go use them for Lagos State. Wella, no more baba sope. Then no go chop Lagos State money. Nobody go pocket Lagos State. Then go take and build Lagos State, build road, build hospital, build houses, and now only one man fit do this job. His name na Abdulaziz Olajide Adediran Jandor. He can't carry one obonge person as the deputy governor. Her name na Funke Akindele Jennifer. My people, what do we wait for? Make we vote for light, vote for change. No be the kind change where they vote before. This one na the original change. How Amumu don't do. Pay they pay.
Everybody down for Eko.
The Zenith Better Life promo is back, and it's bigger and better. You could be one of 20 lucky customers to win 150,000 Naira every 2 weeks from now till January 31st, 2023. To qualify, simply open a Zenith Bank account and maintain a minimum balance of 5,000 Naira. For more information, visit www.zenithbank.com/betterlife.
Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Nigeria's pension industry has grown over the last 18 years since the Pension Reform Act was initially enacted in 2004. The industry has ensured that the average Nigerian worker is able to retire in peace and dignity. The Act brought about the professionalization of pension fund administration and the growth of the pension industry in Nigeria. According to the reports, the bill for an act to amend the Pension Reform Act 2014 to exclude the National Assembly Service from the contributory pension scheme and establish the National Assembly Service Pension Board and for related matters has been passed by the House of Representatives to exempt the National Assembly staff from the contributory pension scheme by establishing a National Assembly Pension Board. The bill was passed for the second time after it was challenged by some lawmakers for breach of due process. The same breach of process for which was stepped down was followed during the passing of the bill in question the second time. There is a concern that this development would throw up agitations by other groups of workers to ask for exemption from the scheme, thereby significantly affecting the future of the scheme. Joining us on the show this morning as we discuss how this bill will affect the future of contributory pension scheme is Johnson Chukwu, Chief Executive Officer of Cowrie Assets, and Oguche Aguda, Chief Executive Officer of Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria. Good morning and welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Hi, Chief. It's good to see you. Compliments of the season, and thank you also for joining us, Oguche Aguda. Well, quickly, I would like to ask both of you. Is contributing pension scheme was considered a major innovation in 2014 to protect the interests of future retirees and all of that. But even originally, the military and security services were exempted. Now you have this bill now, the National Assembly saying they want to have their own pensions burned. They want to be out of it. The big fear is that if they go ahead with it and that happens, then other groups will want to opt out of it, and that contributory pension scheme will collapse because already prison services, police, they are also saying they don't want to be part of it. What is that major defect in the law as it is that both of you think, is attracting this objection to it by other stakeholders?
All right, thank you, Dr. Ruben Abati, for having me and Seni and every one of you. Let me first, by saluting Nigerians, Merry Christmas in advance. One of the things I say is that there are certainly no defects in the regulation or the rules that establish the pension fund scheme. What we're dealing with is a tendency of Nigerians not to be responsible for their own welfare. And I'm saying this in the sense of seriousness. Take, for instance, the issue I'm talking about the National Assembly passing a bill to exempt National Assembly staff from the contributory pension scheme. We know, remember that the contributory pension scheme is basically about, look, you're going to contribute part of your pensionable income, and your employer will also contribute a segment of your pensionable income into a PFA, who will invest this fund for your retirement benefit. So if people do not want to contribute, there has been the agitation that they don't want to contribute, which means they don't want to set aside something for their own retirement. They are not ready to make sacrifice for their future. That's, for me, is the crux of the matter. I can understand the government saying, look, we will allow the military to be exempted, in as much as we kick against that. But the reality is that the logic is that these people are putting their lives in danger for the rest of the country. That the government should be able to contribute fully their own pensionable fund. So if you say that, look, a man who takes a gun to fight for the country, you don't need to deduct anything from his pensionable income so as to make allowance, make provision for his future when he retires. That may be understandable. How do you explain that of the National Assembly employees? Again, if the National Assembly is the one making this law, the National Assembly should be, as a lawmaker, should also be the custodians of the law. The National Assembly, Nigerian National Assembly was the one that passed the bill of the Pension Fund Reform Act. And the logic of it is still cannot be faulted. That in the past, people work. Look at where we are as a country today. The government is struggling. Government is not paying salaries in several states. Some states governments are owing 5 months, 6 months salary arrears to teachers and some other public servants. So what will be the fate of these people when the government is not deriving any service from them? Because when you retire, government is not deriving service from you. You can't go on strike because your strike is of no relevance to the government. And then there's nothing set aside. Then whatever is left is an unfunded scheme that the government say, look, you are entitled to receive 50,000 naira every month when you retire. But there is no money set aside for it. And that's why one of the problems we have low life expectancy in the country. Because Nigerians do not have something to look up to. There's nothing that gives a man or a woman confidence that in your old age, there's something there for you that you can live on. Probably one of the reasons why countries like Japan, Norway have some of the longest life expectancy, because the old people know there is something set aside for them. They don't have to go depend on their children or depend on the goodwill of a new government that says, look, we're owing pensioners arrears of pension for 10 months. Okay, we'll pay you 1 month. And they expect you to come and prostrate for them. The reality of the pension scheme is that it was set up so that people who work will live a fulfilled life in their old age. They have something to live on.
Okay, let's go quickly to Mr. Aguda. Mr. Aguda, do you share the same views with High Chief Chukwu here? And then, considering the fact that there are assets involved, if this law is, modified as is being requested, what will happen to existing assets? And did your association, the Pension Fund Operators Administration of Nigeria, did you have the opportunity to make an input into this exercise that is going on in the National Assembly? Because one of the sticky points is that there was no public hearing before, National Assembly members started passing a bill to amend the law.
Thank you, Dr. Ruben. I think the first thing is I totally agree with the High Chief, Mr. Chukwu, on points he made. And just to say that, we were not contacted. There was no public hearing. There was no newspaper adverts. There was no engagement. Even the regulator was not contacted. And I think this is totally out of character from the House. This should not be allowed to stand. It's immoral because they make rules and because it benefits them. As a matter of fact, there are a number of bills before the House currently to amend some aspects of the Pension Act, but it hasn't received any attention. But because this affects them, it's passed speedily. And I think it's very wrong. But just to jump on some of the things Mr. Chukwu said, and one of the things you alluded to is the fact that, the contributory pension scheme, from the way it's structured at the moment, is that when your contributions come, it's not just kept under the mattress or kept in the back, it's invested. And some of these investments are investments in bonds, from which the government borrows, invested in equities, invested in infrastructure, invested in companies. So if we want to exit any group, we'll have to now unwind these investments, lose the value. So it goes against the reason why the scheme was set up. And like Mr. Chukwu said, if the National Assembly passed this act because we wanted to resolve a particular problem of unfunded pension scheme, then why are we now going back? The world is moving towards a contributory pension scheme system whereby as you work, you contribute. But they want to go back to the defined benefit scheme whereby they set up a pensions board to manage the pension scheme. I mean, who is going to be managing that pensions board? Are they professionals there? Are we going to have different regulatory systems? So I think this actually goes back, and there should be a debate around this, for bills to pass without a public hearing. The operators were not contacted, labor was not contacted, the employers were not contacted, the federal government, who they are proposing to debit consolidated revenue fund to get the funds from, were not contacted. So I think this is not the way bills should be passed, and we are not happy with this development at all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Aguda. Now, going back to the question that was asked earlier, Mr. Chief Chukwu, Dr. Abati had spoken about some of the reasons why there's been a call for, first last year, we had the police force also seeking to pass a bill to exempt them, since they mentioned that the military and intelligence organizations, some security intelligence organizations were exempted, and so they felt that there were some issues around the current system. Now, I'd like you to speak to that, especially as some people speak about remittances, which is a big issue around the contributory pension scheme, where it is deducted from staff, but it's not remitted. How do we begin to fix this so that we do not have more groups pushing to be exempted because they feel at the end of the day they are cheated off their hard-earned money that they've been deducted off over the years? And Mr. Oguche, I'd like you to speak to that as well.
Okay, in the first place, if you look at the issues around the lack of Nigerian police asking to be, what the Nigerian police got was they got a closed pension scheme, a closed pension fund. So you have NPF pension fund, which did not really exempt them from contribution, but is now managed as a standalone enclosed scheme for their members. When you talk of the issue of remittance, and some employees may be concerned that maybe their employers do not remit their deductions, and the employer's contribution. That could have, there could be instances of that, but those instances are not as to lead to anybody agitating that the scheme should be balkanized. But most importantly, if you have a scheme that is completely unfunded, which means your employer has no duty to even remit anything or set aside anything in a sinking fund. So the employer makes a book entry and says, look, we know that you'll be entitled to so and so when you retire, but there's no provision for it. It's worse than that your employer has deducted from you and not remitted it. Because under the current regulation, PENCOM will impose penalties for the employer, including interest payment for the unlimited amount. And anybody who does not have a pension certificate will not have access to a government contract or will not be able to access some government facilities, because a lot of times, if you're a private sector operator and you're going to a government entity and you're asking for any form of relationship, they will, among the things they will ask you is to bring your PENCOM certificate to show that you are compliant, you're 100% compliant with deducting from your employees and remitting to a pension fund administrator. So, but the key thing is that you are looking at maybe 1 or 2 or 3 companies or a few companies are in default. And then you want to create a system that will make it even no longer obligatory for those institutions to even deduct or contribute their own. So you are coming from a situation where you have some default and you are moving towards abolishing the process. That has created so much value. And when you talk of the values the pension scheme has created, it's massive. Today, as at the end of October, total assets under management of PFAs is about 14.588 trillion. Call it average of approximately 14.6 trillion. They are the largest pool of fund managers in the country other than the banks. Of the bills that the federal government has sold, of the government borrowing, the federal government has borrowed 9.2 trillion naira from the pension scheme, about 63%. So what we then don't tend to recognize that the macroeconomic benefit of the pension scheme is that we are in a position to, one, fund partly the government, fund the private sector. About 2.1 trillion naira has been lent to corporates in form of corporate bonds. There's companies that borrowed at rates that are lower than what they would have gotten from the banking system. That has gone into productive activities. Those are the things that are at risk. That if we continue in this trajectory, we're going to balkanize the pension scheme. And the truth is that one of the best reforms that was done under the civilian government, the pension scheme.
No. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chuka. I'd like to speak to some of the things you talked about, the pension commission, penalizing organizations. You talked about 1 or 2. Some people might argue with that because unfortunately, where it is not properly regulated, you have defaulters again and again, which a number of people have complained. I'd like you to speak to that, Mr. Oguche.
Yes, thank you. I think just last week, there was actually a report from the Pension Commission that they recovered about 23 billion from defaulting firms. And what happens is that the Commission has agents who go around to ensure that the defaulters meet up with their obligations. But then there has to be a part from employees. So there's a whistleblowing policy where if you're working somewhere and your pension has not been deducted, you can also whistleblow and report to the Commission, and the Commission will set up recovery agents, and they actually took some people to court. So that process is ongoing. But like Mr. Chuku said, these are few and far between. But if you look at the whole system, and I think, Ayo, you spoke to the point of agitation and people agitating here and then maybe to leave the scheme, some groups. It's typically people from the public service, number one. Number two, there are a number of half-truths being bandied around. And sometimes half-truths, they do more damage than lies. So people look at the military and say, oh, the military is receiving more than me in pensions. But, they say if the grass is greener on the other side, then the people over there are probably paying more bills. So we need to x-ray that, if the military is receiving more in pensions because they've exited, it's because they earn more. So the police people, they make a point that, they want to receive as more as the military. But if your salary is not high when you are working, why will your pension be high? So the contributory pension scheme is based on the salary. So one of the things that we have made, recommendations we have made, is to increase the salary, or for your employer, which is the government, to increase the contribution. So with most of the agitations that we hear, no one has said they didn't get their pensions. So we need to isolate the issue. So no one has said they haven't gotten their pensions under the contributory pension scheme. Maybe few and far between because of verification issues. What they are typically saying is that it's not as high enough. So if we agree on that, then we can move forward to say, okay, if the issue is it's not as high, then fine. How do we make it high? You need to contribute more. You know, and I'm preaching the gospel of voluntary contributions. I do voluntary contributions because what Mr. Chuku was saying is that your pension is your future. And when I speak to pensioners, when I speak to retirees, and I say you can't leave your future to somebody else and say your employer is not paying you more. Whilst you are working, you need to ask yourself, how much should I be putting aside every day so that when I retire, I can have the amount of money I want to do? So people should need to do that. It's not about looking to the employer. What happens in future if the next government comes to say, okay, they can't pay these liabilities? I spoke about half-truths. Last month, the military, some members of the military, they were actually protesting in front of the National Assembly and in front of the Chief of Army Staff. Why? Because their pensions were not paid. So yes, they have a separate board and they have pulled out, but it's dependent on if the person that is signing pays. So we want to go back to the previous scheme where you are bribing someone, it's my turn, pay my pensions. But under the contributory pension scheme, everyone has an account. You can see your RSA, your retirement savings account. You know how much is there. You know how much is contributed. Even if your PFA fails or is acquired, like we've seen recently in some acquisition, your RSA is still there. So the scheme itself should be protected. There might be one or two things that we can tweak. And I always say the largest room in the world is room for improvement. So as lawmakers and as a country, we should be discussing how can we improve this, not how can we use our hands and bring it down. So that's my submission on your question, Ayo.
Good to see you, my brother Gucci, once again. Real quickly, Rufai here anyway. So I'd like to ask you, what are those things we can tweak about, the pension scheme? What are those things you really think we should be able to tweak?
Thank you, Rufai. So I think the key thing, as a country, is that we need to look at the collectives, right? So when people retire, they want to buy a house, for instance. They want to buy a car, for instance. They want to send their children to school, for instance, and they say, I need to take that money out. But what we fail to understand is that the ideal thing is not when you're retiring that you should be buying those things. Ideally, those things collectively should be in place, right? So if we have a transport system, if we have an educational system, if we have a health system, so some of the things that we need to be doing is to set the environment whereby pension funds can begin to invest some of these funds for infrastructure development such that everyone has a decent house. And part of the things we are doing is the RSA mortgage. And these are the things we need to be speaking about. Recently, the National Pension Commission brought out guidelines whereby people can use their pensions to be able to fund their mortgage and get their homes. So these are some of the things we need to do. How can pension funds be used for infrastructure development whereby the funding is helping the collective as opposed to individuals? So what happens is that one individual wants to take funds out, and they don't care where the money is coming from. Yesterday, the World Bank predicted that next year we will spend 123% of our revenue on debt service. So we are borrowing to service debt, you can imagine. So if we continue to go back to the unfunded system, the system will collapse. So some of the things that I say we need to do is to find ways with the pension system can fund infrastructure in a sustainable way, government guarantees and things like that, but also to encourage people, financial literacy, to begin to voluntarily contribute. For instance, if someone starts work at 25 and you know that I'm going to work for 35 years, you can tell yourself that this is how much I want to get when I retire. I can begin to put some money, more money in my pension pot. Another thing we need to tweak is ability for pension funds to invest offshore and where we diversify and so that the vagaries of the exchange rate does not affect the pension funds negatively. So those are some of the things that I think we should be focusing on and debating as opposed to trying to pull down on people leaving. Thank you, Rufai.
Thank you. Okay. How about you, sir? Those things we can tweak, in your own opinion?
Let me start from the things we've done already. In the first place, they introduced a bulk withdrawal option where a retiree can actually make a bulk withdrawal for up to 25% of the amount in the person's retirement savings account. Secondly, they just introduced a scheme that will allow those who have RSA, those who have pension fund, to use part of it to make contribution, equity contribution for mortgages. So which means there's actually be some level of reforms to accommodate the exigencies of life. Like I said, then those who have attained certain age and they lose their jobs, they're also allowed to make some withdrawals from their pension scheme so that, one, if you have a huge contribution, the possibility you can actually start life, even if you want to go into private business, from your from withdrawal of part of your savings is there, and then the rest can be paid you over time. But among the reforms we can look at is that, I mean, which had mentioned the issue of right now the pension fund can invest outside the country, so they are limited to assets within the country, and sometimes those assets are not giving positive return when you compare that to the interest rate in the environment, which means effectively the wealth of retirees are being eroded. Among the things I would suggest in addition to allowing the pension fund to invest outside the country is the issue of increasing what is called a pensionable income. Your pensionable income is your basic salary, your transport allowance, your housing allowance. There are other components of your income that are not pension deductible. So we should apply what we have applied in tax management, in tax deductions, where the tax law has been modified to say, look, it's about your gross income. And your taxable income is now your gross income after making allowances for some, after making provision for some allowances. We have to bring that into the picture so that institutions, because one of the things that people use to circumvent their obligation as employers of labor to make huge reasonable contribution on behalf of their staff is that they make sure that the pensionable income is small, whereas your other incomes are loaded, so they don't have to pay 10% of that addition, the portion that is not part of your pensionable income. So if we now adopt the global income approach and say, look, even if you reduce it from 10%, I mean the employee's contribution, to maybe 7.5%, but the entire remuneration of the staff is what is pensionable. So the employer has to contribute 10% of that entire global income. And then while the employee will also contribute 8% of the global income. So that way you're going to be able to build a larger pool of pensionable assets that employees can basically be assured that when they leave employment, when the old age comes, catches up on them, they have something to live on comfortably throughout the rest of their life.
Well, thank you very much. High Chief Johnson Chukwu, CEO Cowry Access, and thank you also very much, Ugochi Agoda, CEO, Pension Operators Administration of Nigeria. Thank you very much indeed. We'll take a short break now. When we return, Ojinika Ojiokwe will be here with details on what's trending. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Imagine your wallet can be everything. Well, almost everything your bank is to you. That's exactly what First Money Wallet is. First Money Wallet from First Bank is another swift and seamless way to bank from your mobile phone. It doesn't matter if you have a First Bank account or not, nor the mobile network you use. Everyone can open a First Money Wallet, and it's very easy. Your phone number is your account number. With First Money Wallet, you can send money using just a phone number, receive money, pay bills, buy airtime and data for yourself or someone else, and check balance. You don't need a bank account at all or BVN to enjoy the boundless possibilities First Money Wallet offers. All you need is a registered phone number, and you can fund your wallet easily through your First Bank account or any bank account and debit card. What's more, First Money Wallet is highly secure with fingerprint technology and PIN. And when you need cash, just walk up to any First Money agent near you to withdraw money. No smartphone, no wahala. Just dial *894*1# on any phone. So it doesn't matter if you live in the city or the remotest part of the country. With First Money Wallet, your transactions are easy, seamless, and secure. Download the First Money Wallet app now. Input your phone number and follow the prompts, or simply dial *894*1#. All money now on First Money. You first. First Bank.
Patricia, crypto made easy.
I've been running my business on my own, trying my best to get it to the next level, but I really need some help to get ahead. I I know just what to do, I'll vault it. For my loans, vault it. Overdraft, vault it. Step by step to my dream business, we vault. Vault is the answer. Salary earners, vault it. Entrepreneurs, vault it. Get your loans with no collateral. Hey. Vault is the answer. Quick sign up, vault it. Zero paperwork, vault it. Step by step to your dream business, we vault. By Polaris Bank.
Vault is available to individuals, SMEs, and corporate customers. Download Vault by Polaris Bank from the Google Play Store or Apple App Store to get started today.
Vault is the answer.
I'm about to serve better breakfast.
If you're in Lagos, you need to see this.
I'm not just streaming content, I'm just escaping traffic.
Get more data to enjoy exclusive content. Dial *141# now. Airtel, the smartphone network.
Chivita season, oh, oh, oh. Feel this Christmas, oh, oh, oh. Let's celebrate with Chivita.
Everyone has a Chivita this season. What's your Chivita?
My people, my name is Emeka, Mekus Kamat. Let me get all this motor. I don't learn my lesson. Somebody come buy motor for my hand, carry big money, come give me. Now when we get bust, now my eye open. I don't know say that 419 be. Now when EFCC babam, now they come bab me too. Now he make me the warn you. All of them when they do business like me, where they carry big money. Well, I go sometimes I go carry transfer, carry bring back. Yeah, they could shine in my eye because the special control unit against money laundering, what they call SCUMO, they don't want say if the money pass 5 million naira for individual, no collect them. If it pass 10 million naira for company, no collect them. Can I go where? Bank. If you not do them like that, 250,000 naira for every day where this offense happen. Or they go suspend your license, or they go cuckoo, shut them down, pata for your hand. No talk say, I know one you.
This message is from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC.
We're so excited to be here today, screening 200 women in uniforms. We're very happy that we can bring to them the right education about breast and cervical cancer.
The screening exercise at the FRSC Abuja headquarters has been amazing. We've been able to screen about 100 female staff successfully.
You see our eyes popping when we have to do something with women.
In the year 2021 alone, we lost 44,699 Nigerian women to cancer.
I learned how to examine my breast to know when the cancer is there and not. I want to just thank the initiative of Access Bank.
We are grateful and we are happy with Access Bank. Kudos to Access Bank. We say thank you.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Joining us now, and it's Friday, is Ojinika Ojiope with stories trending around
That was
the
an
world.
epic
Hello,
introduction.
Gilex.
Well done. He's like, joining us now. You deserve an award, Dr. Abati. How are you this morning? Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Ayo, it's our favorite day of the week, isn't it?
Bringing the sunshine into the room.
Mayalo too,
Love it.
right?
Yeah.
Good morning, Rufai. How are you?
Morning, Audrey. I'm walking on sunshine.
Well, all right. Good morning to you, viewers. Here are some of the stories that are trending across the globe. Oh, no headlines. All right, I guess we can get it in a little bit, can we? All right. Well, let's begin what's trending then. The presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar's campaign rally in Anambra State on Thursday has generated mixed reactions on social media, especially after the former vice president during the rally called for the support of the Southeast, saying he's the region's surest route to presidency. Let's take a quick listen before we take some reactions.
I am going to be the stepping stone to an Igbo president in this country. I have shown it by my actions because this is the third time I am running with an Igbo man. If you really want to produce a president, then vote Atiku Okowa ticket. Yes, sir. So the people of Anambra State, I want to thank you very much for this wonderful reception. I never thought I would see such a crowd in Anambra State. Right. And believe me, we are not going to forget you, and we are going to reward you handsomely.
Well, I guess we have our headlines today. Let's start again. Good morning to you, viewers. Here are some of the stories that are trending across the globe. We'll continue on our story. Well, ahead of the meeting, Atiku Abubakar met with the governor of Anambra State, Professor Charles Chukwuma Soludo. The meeting took place at the government house in Awka, the state's capital. Soludo welcomed Atiku, endorsing him as one of the two front runners in the presidential race. Well, let's take a listen before we take some reactions.
You are one of the two front runners for the presidency of Nigeria. Right? One of the two. And in the fullness of time, we're going to have a conversation. So I'm in politics, but I'm not yet, I'm still struggling whether I've become a politician or not. I say it as it is. And we come to say it for the sake of this country, for the sake of Nigeria. Let me, on behalf of the government and good people of Anambra, the light of the nation, welcome you to Anambra State. You're welcome. Well, in-law, I will say, welcome home, because he is an in-law as well. People forget that. So welcome home.
Well, let's take some tweets. This person says, Chukwuma Soludo, a confirmed PDP member who is deceiving Anambra people with ABGA. Till today, he is 100% PDP and working tirelessly to see that Atiku wins. I heard Atiku promised him that he will take over the presidency from him. CC Soludo, Anambra awaits you at the polls in 2026. Well, Harrison wrote, Soludo told Atiku that he is one of the two front runners. We are from Anambra. He will still come to campaign for a second tenure. We will remind him how many people that are running by then. Well, Franklin wrote, since you have been going for campaign rallies, sir, you have been visiting the traditional rulers of community. But when it gets to Anambra, you went visiting the governor. You paid to criticize your former running mate. The traditional rulers couldn't receive you, Unifier, sir. Well, I think this is another trend on social media, Dr. Abati, because, I guess he's quite apt that, during these rallies, you see these presidential candidates go around and they go to visit the monarchs, but, he obviously went to visit Soludo, which was another topic of debate on social media. But I guess you guys touched on it a little during the headlines. I don't know what your comments are especially with regards to that last tweet as well.
One of the points that I had made is that we have a sitting governor of an opposition party, the All Progressives Grand Alliance, ABGA, receiving the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party and, granting him audience and trying to encourage him. I hope he will do the same, for other political parties, because we keep saying that the Electoral Act is very clear. There should be a level playing field for every political candidate that comes to a particular state. Everybody should be given a chance. We have had spectacles of billboards being removed, of persons being denied access, to the media, or being denied access to state, facilities like the stadium. But in Anambra State, at least Governor Soludo has shown that, he wouldn't do that. And we hope that he will do what he has done with the PDP with other political parties. The second point he made is that he thinks that Atiku Abubakar is one of the two possible, persons who will emerge as president in 2023. And in that regard, while he's been consistent, in line with the piece he wrote, History Beckons, and how he will always say the truth, and he repeated that on that occasion, there are persons who think, as an Igbo man, playing the politics of proximity, that is better off supporting somebody from the southeast, either Mr. Peter Obi or the candidate of his own party, presidential candidate of his own party. But clearly, he has said his choice is between the APC presidential candidate and the PDP presidential candidate, because he thinks that that's the best choice for Igbo land, for Ndigbo. The third issue here was that in that video, he started by saying he's not a politician. He's trying to become one. So if he says he's not a politician, he's been running for the position of governor in Anambra State, and this time around he got lucky. I think he probably meant that in jest. But we know he's an academic, he's an economist, he's an international scholar. Okay, he wears many caps, but of course, he knows that in addition to whatever he is, he's a politician. And beyond all of this is the presidential candidate of the PDP himself. He says he's a unifier. As I said earlier, some people will say, you say you are a unifier, you have not unified your own political party. Even if 9 governors followed him to the event, so many other, high-ranking members of the People's Democratic Party also showed up there to show solidarity. And I said that looks like a message to Mr. Peter Obi, that, okay, he may not be with the PDP in his own state, but that the People's Democratic Party is still very strong in that state. And beyond that, the party even has what looks like a not clearly stated support of the governor of the state, who belongs to even another political party. But politicians will make promises. And I pointed out that, look, he didn't talk about the second Niger bridge at Onitsha, which we're told is likely to be completed in 2024. But they are opening it for a 30 days window. So who is going to complete that 7.7 kilometers on the Owerri end and the 3.3 kilometers on the Asaba end that nobody has even touched? But at least the Obosi Owerri link route has been joined, and I've seen reports about people going for Yuletide in the east being very happy that there's a reduction in traffic congestion, but they will enjoy that benefit for just 30 days. But what the people of the east want is that, given the strategic economic importance of that second Niger bridge at Onitsha, I keep adding Onitsha because there are other bridges on the River Niger, given its importance, whoever becomes president of Nigeria will have to complete it to make sure that it works. Over 300 billion naira, or was it 300 million US dollars, have been spent on that project since it started. The people would like to see concrete results. In the same way, in which they expect that other routes, like Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, that has been on perpetually without completion, will also be completed, and the same case with other major routes across the country.
Well said, Dr. Bati. Rufai, quick comment from you.
Real quickly, I think the main topic here is about fairness. And we have to state again, over and over again, fairness has to be brought to the table. Ideally, if we need leadership, it should be about competence, the most competent hand. But as we speak today in Nigeria, everybody has started, oh, it should go to one region, it should go to one region, it should go to one region. So it is time that people also look at the possibility of the Igbos having their own fair share. I asked a question earlier on Oji. I said, how long will the Igbos keep aligning with other people? The same alignment they did in '79. Oh, vice presidential candidate Alex Ekweme emerged. Is that how long? Since we've returned to democracy, since 1999? Other parts have had their own parts of the cherry. What does fairness say? The people that have not had should be able to have.
Yes.
And this fairness too is across all the regions that have not had a stab at the presidency. It is when you are fair across board, then we can now come back and resettle and talk about competence. I think that's the biggest loss that's going on. But when somebody says, oh, I want to be a stepping stone, the question should be asked, has your region ever had this at any point in time? If they have, or has your group, tribal group, ever had this at any point? If they have, can others too have? I'm not saying any man doesn't have a right to his ambition, but also we should be fair, because it is fairness that can heal this country. This country is suffering from a lot of injustice today. It should be fairness for the people of the Southeast, for the people of other regions. And that's why I said, even if it's not been completed, yesterday I tweeted something, I said, kudos to President Buhari. At least we have some movement as regards Second Niger Bridge. But please, they should complete it. And they shouldn't stop there. There's a lot of economic activities going on in Aba. Imagine a train track in Aba to bring out all the goods produced in Aba to parts of the Southwest. Then we can build this country. Yes. This country is great. It is the best kept secret in the world. Let's be fair to one another, and God will bless all of us, and we'll all love this country.
Right. Well said, Rufai. We'll take another story. On Thursday, the Abuja-Kaduna train crashed a principal accountant with the finance department at NTA Channel 5, Salimota Idowu Sulaiman, at the Chika Kore exit of Kubwa in Abuja. Salimota was on her way to work when the incident occurred at about 10 a.m. It is reported that Salimota was driving, attempted to cross the rail line as the Abuja-Kaduna train was advancing on high speed. Let's take a look at the video of an eyewitness during the incident before we come back for a discussion. Well, viewer discretion is advised. This was so sad. May her soul rest in peace. Ayo. I mean, there are so many comments on social media regarding this story. I mean, some people are saying it might have been a suicide attempt. Why was the car stationary? As you could see in that footage, she attempted to get out of the car before the train hit her. I mean, I don't know where to go from here.
It's very unfortunate that the Abuja-Kaduna train route is in the news again, and not for very pleasant reasons. It's just been recently opened following the bandit attacks and kidnapping on that route, and now we're seeing this unfortunate incident, really heartbreaking. First thing is that if you watch the video, observers have said that there are certain precautions or cautions that should be around the rail tracks. There should be a bell, there should be lights so that commuters or the people who are driving would know when to stop because the train is approaching. I didn't quite see that there. So I don't know if that was in place to alert the Salimota that a train was approaching. Because one might say that, oh, she could have heard the noise, but it was a fast-moving train. You could see, I mean, the opening of the door was a split second before the train hit. Very sad. So that's one thing to look out for. did the government in terms of putting in the proper measures to ensuring that people who drive along that route are protected? If they didn't, then there are big issues to come out of this. In other parts of the world, you would see a massive lawsuit if that were the case. You know, in terms of accidents and caused by negligence and lack of safety, health and safety procedures being followed. That's something to certainly watch, because we see train tracks in Nigeria, even in places where we have the lights and the bells. We see market women, market men on the train tracks, and when they hear it, they quickly scramble off so that the train doesn't hit them. This speaks a lot to the attention we pay to health and safety in the nation. A life has been lost that perhaps shouldn't have been. You know, it's unfortunate that it was banded as a suicide initially until, you know, like you saw that there was she tried to, again, even if it were suicide, sometimes last minute you change your mind when the reality faces you, but we cannot make that conclusion until a full investigation has been done and then we see the results of that. Very sad.
Yes, very sad. Again, why was the car stationary? That was actually the main question there.
Well, first, may the soul of the dead rest in peace. Very unfortunate. The lady who was working in the accounts department, the finance department of the Nigerian Television Authority, going to work only to meet tragedy along the way. What we've been told is that the authorities have said that this will be investigated, and we hope that the investigation will be thorough. This incident alone is enough reason why, in fact, that Abuja-Kaduna train line should be shut down again for the investigation to be completed, for us to know what exactly happened. Because when the Minister of Transportation was saying that they are taking every precaution, one of the things he was saying is that they had applied technology, they had applied all kinds of things to ensure safety along the road. This calls to question all those promises, by the Minister of Transportation. The railway is not new in Nigeria. It's been there. When we were in primary school in those days, we used to learn, rail lines. In civic studies, we used to draw it. And of course, I'm sure I traveled, along train lines in those days. If there is any intersection between the rail track and the road, there is usually some kind of barricade there with staff stationed there that will either raise it or lower it. And when a train is approaching that particular intersection, you will be hearing heavy noise. Yes. They will be blowing the horn for everybody to know, and there will be somebody by that intersection who is carrying a flag and telling vehicles to stop. In fact, a vehicle will not even be allowed to get close to it. So they built this Abuja-Kaduna train line. What we are seeing is that all the protestations about the need for safety, before it was security, when people were attacked along that train line on March 28th. Now it is safety. What it means is that nobody has taken any safety precautions. And it's unfortunate, and that's why I'm suggesting that the reopening of the Abuja-Kaduna train line has failed. And this person has died because those safety measures have not been put in place. Let nobody try to explain it one way or the other that maybe it's a suicide attempt. She was not even alone in the car, we were told. There were other colleagues in the car, and then this incident occurred. So if they claim that she wanted to commit suicide, did the other people too want to commit suicide? So no possibility, however, should be ruled out. The investigation should be thorough, but this should be an opportunity for rethinking of whatever it is that the Ministry of Transportation and the National Railway Corporation may have done before they took the decision to reopen that train line. And they owe us an explanation. Their explanation will not bring the dead back to life, but they need to say a lot more about what they have done. And we will review what they have done, we will evaluate it, and it may be the basis for us to insist that that train line should be shut down again until the right thing is done.
Well said, Dr. Abati. Rufai.
This is too chilling. This is just too sad. But like Dr. Abati, see, there's a lot of incompetence in Nigeria. And I see lawsuits. That's all I see. lawsuit based on negligence, and this must be tried out in court, despite the investigation.
Absolutely.
Well,
may her soul rest in perfect peace. We'll take our final story. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex's highly anticipated docu-series, Harry and Meghan, which premiered last week, has got many fans and critics of the royals talking. One of the topics highlighted in Volume 1 of the docu-series was how Harry and Meghan cared for their little ones with the help of their nanny, Lauren Khumalo, who's from Zimbabwe. Well, here's a picture of Khumalo with baby Archie tied to her back, a tradition well practiced in Zimbabwe. And I must say, here in Nigeria too, this picture was trending on social media. Right
This
now.
is such a great way to end the week.
To end it
Beautiful.
in a lighter note with this story of Nani Khumalo. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous to see tradition practiced across and highlighted.
Exporting our tradition.
Exactly, I love it. But the comment here is that when the royals see baby Archie tied to this nanny's back like this, they will just pass out. Dr. Batty, really quickly.
Let's not promote racism.
That's the comment out there.
Is a human being like every other person.
Absolutely.
So racist sentiments are not acceptable.
Absolutely.
But the bigger story is the Netflix docu-series, Harry and Meghan. And the question today in the UK, as one paper put it out, is why Harry? Why will you do this to your family? Because he's been complaining about how the brother was screaming at him, how the dad, has not been supportive enough, and people are talking about assault on the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. But I think every family has its own problems, whether royal family or the family of commoners.
Yes, well said, Dr. Batty. Well, that's all we have today, guys. I hope you guys have a great weekend.
And you too.
Thank you again. Well, that's all I have for you on What's Trending today. I'll see you all next week.
And that's all on today's edition of The Morning Show. Rochus Odiri will be here next to take you through Global Business Report. Stay with us. It's still the Arise News channel.
Knowledge is power. Information is currency. Trust us to tell you what you need to hear. Welcome to the program. You're with Arise News in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Breaking news, exclusive interviews, unrivaled analysis. It's you, the audience, who drives our agenda. We tell the stories that inform you, the stories that are important to you, and the stories that are about you. We are not every news channel. We are Arise News.
A bit of showbiz. If it's happening in the world of entertainment, you'll be hearing about it here.
From what's trending on the socials to music and movies, and all the latest showbiz gossip from around the world. Join us for a front row seat at the Oscars in Los Angeles, or the biggest moments from Fashion Week. It's fun, it's fresh, and it's packed full of all the entertainment news you need to know.